make your way down the stairs and out to the front of the memorial where the City Hall is. This meeting is also being live streamed on the Council YouTube pages and will be available after the meeting. Please would speakers use microphones at all times and speak directly into the microphone, and would participants please mute their microphones when not speaking. We're going to go round the council table and introduce members of the committee and officers, and I will start with Kate.
Thank you, Chair. Not Councillor Charlie Kane, I'm substituting Councillor Kate Oliver. Can I make a statement about sorry, what we discussed earlier?
Well, we're just going around and find out who people are to start with.
Okay, that's me, Councillor Kate Oliver.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Councillor Amanda Fox.
Hello, I'm Councillor Adam Giles.
Behind.
Good morning, I'm Councillor Richard Laws.
Councillor Judith Lubbock.
And again.
Good morning, Councillor Ian Stukeley.
Councillor Emma Hampton.
Councillor Ash Haynes.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Jenny Knight.
Thank you. We'll move round to the officers. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Committee. I'm Sarah Ashurst, the Head of Planning and Regulatory Services.
Thank you.
Good morning, Jodie Cunnington-Brock, Solicitor to the Council.
Thank you. And two at the front. Oh, and the parent, yes, sorry.
Andrew Turnbull, Development Strategy Manager.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. My name is David Parkin. I'm the Development Manager for the City Council.
My name is Tracy Armitage. I'm a Senior Planning Officer at the City Council.
Two up here.
Robert Carmichael, Democratic Services Manager.
Leonie Bowitt, Senior Committee Officer.
Thank you very much for that. Members may use electrical devices to access their meeting papers, but we do ask that members don't use these devices to message anyone in or outside the meeting regarding the application under discussion. Members are reminded not to discuss any of the applications during the breaks. Visitors are welcome to use mobile phones and other devices, including cameras, but please use them discreetly, set them to silent, and do not use voice or camera flash functions. We have a short break about 12 o'clock, and between 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock, there's any business left to be resolved. Well, that's me, don't need that. We'll move on now to the Planning Committee. Apologies for absence.
We've had apologies from Councillor Harper and Councillor Kane, and Councillor Oliver is acting as Councillor Kane's substitute.
Thank you. Declarations of interest, anyone? Councillor Oliver?
Yeah, just wanted to highlight that the application's in my ward, but I'm approaching this with open mind.
Thank you. Any other declarations of interest, anyone? No, thank you. Minutes. Minutes hold on the 15th of January. I hope you all read them. Do we agree they have correct record? Thank you. I'm going to now move on, but I think David needs to make a statement first about new planning laws or something similar.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just before we actually get into the business of the committee today, I just wanted to take the opportunity to remind members of the provisions of the Town and Country Planning Consultation England Direction 2026. An email was sent round by Sarah Ashurst shortly after this piece of legislation was published on the 31st of March this year. But just a reminder, the direction applies to any application for planning permission which is for development which includes the provision of 150 or more houses, flats or houses and flats, and has not been determined by a local planning authority before the 11th of May. So the 11th of May was this Monday, so as of the 11th of May, all applications that the Council's local planning authority considers, which are for the number of flats and houses I referred to, are covered by the provisions of the direction. The direction requires that where a local planning authority proposes to refuse an application to which the direction applies, the authority must consult the Secretary of State before doing so. So that applies to at whatever level the application is determined, but yeah, it applies to all applications that the councillor's local planning authority considers for 150 or more houses, flats, or houses and flats. So that's just for information and a matter of process. Thank you.
Thank you, David, for that. And we'll move straight on now to our application, which is Victoria House on Queen Street, and I'll ask Tracy Oldness to take us through the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Can everybody hear me okay? Thank you. Okay, so just take you to the site plan. So the application relates to the Victoria House site, the former office headquarters of Marsh Insurance, site currently in use as a temporary public car park. The application before you today proposes a high-density residential-led mixed-use redevelopment comprising 432 homes. And members may recall that at pre-application stage, the applicant and his team presented an earlier iteration of the scheme. And I think that was back at the beginning of 2025. Members have received an updates report. I don't propose to take you through it in full. It is quite short, but I do want to refer members to contact from a resident on Victoria Street who is asking whether the scheme can be amended in order to protect their privacy. And that's reported on the updates report. So in terms of the presentation, the first part, I do want to take you through photographs and plans of the scheme, just to make sure that you have a good understanding of what is proposed. There are a large number of plans, but I will be moving through them quite quickly. And so I would invite members to follow that presentation, both looking at the main screen, but if you've got your council laptop with you today, following it also on the PowerPoint that you were sent yesterday. So in terms of start of the presentation, we start with the location plan. This plan identifies the site boundaries. It's a 2.3 hectare site. The plan shows the footprint of the former T-shaped office building. The site is in the city centre policy area, has road frontages onto Queen's Road, Brazengate, St Stephen's Road. Hang on. There we go. Okay. So the southern boundary of the site marks the edge of the city centre policy area. Properties on Victoria Street back onto that site, and those properties form part of a wider residential area that is located beyond the site boundary. Properties on Victoria Street are two-storey in scale, many of them are locally listed. To the north of the site we have Queen's Road, and on the northern side of that we have town centre uses associated with the city centre. We've got multi-storey car park, hotel, student accommodation. To the east we've got Sainsbury's supermarket. To the west, either side of St Stephen's Road, mix of commercial uses. And in this little cutout in the application boundary is Needham House, which is a locally listed building in commercial use. So the site, other than its entrance, lies between two conservation areas, and you can see these identified pink on the plan in front of you. To the north is the city centre conservation area, the boundary running along Queen's Road. And to the south is Newmarket conservation area, the boundary being marked by the southern and western boundary of the site. Just going to take you through some photographs. Just a reminder of Victoria House as was. The first photograph is taken from Chapelfield Road, looking across St Stephen's Roundabout towards Victoria House. Note the trees on the site frontage. These are covered by a group TPO which covers both those trees and trees across the site generally. And another photograph taken from Queen's Road looking across to the site. Victoria House previously was quite a linear building extended across part of that road frontage, set back behind a green space which is designated open space on the DM policies map. And another photograph taken from Brazen Gate looking across the car park which was used in association with the office building, and you can see there the kind of T-shaped plan of the previous Victoria House building and the wing that extended into the site. On this photograph you can also see the southern boundary of the site with Victoria Street. That boundary is delineated by a mix of boundary treatment including supporting boundary walls, fences, hedges and trees. And I think you can see just about on this photograph that there is a change in levels between properties on Victoria Street and the site, but that change in levels decreases as you move along the site boundary towards St Stephen's Road. So in terms of the site and its existing use, this is showing the use of the site as a public car park. Again, in this photograph you can see residential properties on Victoria Street. And standing within that car park looking north, you can see the buildings on Queen's Road. And then I've got just 3 photographs showing in a bit more detail that boundary with Victoria Street. So this is at the eastern end of the site where there is more marked change in site level, kind of a midway point where there's lesser, but sorry, just going back too quickly then. So this is a middle point where there is still a change in levels, but it's been reduced as you've moved along the boundary. And then as you get closer to the site entrance, site levels are more or less equivalent. And then just a couple of photographs showing the kind of context of the site. Mentioned Queen's Road and development that sits fronting Queen's Road, multi-storey car park, hotel and student accommodation. And then to the rear, outside of the city centre of Victoria Street, these are low-rise buildings and, as I've said, a number of them are listed. So just before I show you the kind of proposed site layout, just a reminder of the former layout of the site. You can see the T-shaped footprint of Victoria House and also the trees across the site that are all covered by the group TPO. And this plan just shows in green the area of the site subject to the designation in the local plan for open space. That green space that's shown on the plan amounts to around 3,300 metres squared. The yellow area on this image is actually showing the extent of the city centre. So going to the proposed layout, following the approximate building line of Victoria House, the development includes 5 blocks across the site frontage to Queen's Road, set back behind a green space which amounts to around 4,700 metres squared. These blocks are referred to in the report as Block 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D, 1E, and these blocks extend into the site towards the site internal access road, which is planned as a home zone, which is a space which is planned to be shared by pedestrians and vehicles on equal terms. To the south of that home zone are 3 blocks, 2A, 2B, 2C, 2A being a terrace of townhouses, 2B and 2C being 2 terraces of duplex apartments. In terms of height, the tallest element of Victoria House has been used as a benchmark. This is an extract from the Design and Access Statement that shows the proposed Queen's Road frontage and the proposed block height relative to the outline of the former Victoria House, which is shown in this blue dashed line. In terms of height across the site, this plan shows the proposed stepping down of the main blocks. So 1A stepping down from 8 to 5 stories, 1B from 9 to 7, 1C 8 to 7, 1D 9 to 7, and 1E 9 to 6. All these blocks, other than 1B and E, have lower buildings attached to them, which range in height from single story, these 2 locations, to 3 stories and 4 stories, adjacent to block C and block D. To the south of the home zone, the townhouses and duplex blocks, the townhouse block is 3-storey, with the upper storey being within the roof space, and the duplex blocks being 4-storey, with the top storey being within the roof space. And this stepping down in building height seeks to respond to the contrasting surroundings created by city centre and the Queen's Road to the north, and the lower density, lower rise residential areas to the south. In terms of massing, this is an extract from the Sunlight and Daylight report. This shows the position and height and massing of Victoria House as was, and alongside that is the layout, height and massing of the proposed development. So now to the kind of detailed master plan, ground floor master plan for the development. This plan shows the site layout, obviously, and also ground floor uses. So in block 1A, around 370 metres squared of floor space is proposed for Class E uses, specifically shared office space. This is shown in beige. And moving across the Queen's Road frontage, 1B would also include commercial floor space at ground floor level, and the supporting documentation describes a potential cafe in that use. Moving further along, these yellow areas, these would be reserved for communal residential amenity space and would be the location of uses such as residence gym, lounges, co-working spaces. These areas of floor space would be linked by a pavilion building, which would act as the main entrance to the development, and that would be the location of the kind of concierge services. The remainder of the floor space, shown in the areas that are in tones of green, they denote residential uses. The pale blue relate to uses, for instance, bike, bin stores, plant and service rooms. In terms of access, the existing access arrangements with entry from St Stephen's Road, one way then through the site with exit onto Brazen Gate would be maintained. Other than for cyclists, cyclists would be allowed to enter and exit via Brazen Gate. The existing ramp access which exits the site at the moment, which runs parallel to Brazen Gate, would be removed, and a new ramped access running parallel to Brazen Gate would serve the development. So in terms of highway works, this plan is taken from the transport assessment, and this shows a 3-metre shared use route along the Queen's Road frontage. And the next plan shows works on Brazen Gate, which are proposed to facilitate the arrangements for cyclists. In terms of upper floors, I'm not proposing to take you through all the upper floor plans, but all the upper floors are residential properties. For the main blocks, these range in size from studios to 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom departments. I've included the 8th floor plan because this shows that within block 1B there would be some additional floor space allocated for communal residential use, which would open out onto a roof level terrace, which would be available for use for all the residents of the development. And then a roof plan. The roof scape would be used for the location of plant and PV panels. You'll note from the report that around 650 panels are proposed across the development as part of the energy strategy for the development. Oops. Sorry. There we go. So before I take you to the details of each block, I'll just show you 4 CGI images which illustrate the development. This one is a view from Queen's Road looking south towards the site, and in this view all 5 blocks are shown set back behind the landscape frontage, which is proposed as a parkland for public use. This image is within that parkland, looking at the approach into the development, the pavilion building, which is intended to be the main entrance to the development, provides access to all of the blocks, the homes within blocks 1B through to 1E. So either side of the pavilion here is block 1C and 1D. Just a closer view of that pavilion entrance. And then the last one, which is taken within the home zone, looking east, and the proposed townhouse block and the duplex block are visible in that image. So going now block by block, block 1A, which is the block closest to St Stephen's roundabout, is an L-shaped block with a splayed corner. This is the block where commercial use is proposed on part of the ground floor area. You'll note from the report that the design approach has been influenced by an assessment of the site's history and that of its surroundings, and as a result 3 typologies are proposed for the taller blocks. 1A has taken inspiration from Needham Place, which is located to the west of the site, and this has influenced the proposed repeated grid of piers, the use of brick arches, the materials palette, and the subdivision of the glazing. In terms of elevations, the north elevation facing Queen's Road is shown in the corner of this plan. If you'll just note the lower building that is joined to 1A, that is the location of the office space. That office space use would extend into the main block. Below that you have the south elevation. This is the elevation which would be facing the home zone and the boundary with Victoria Street residents and their boundary. Side elevations, the top one, which is the west elevation, this elevation would face St Stephen's Road. You'll note in this view the stepping down of Block 1A, the change in the roof form. In this area here would be the home zone, and the red dashed line marks the site boundary with the closest residential properties on Victoria Street shown. Upper floors of Block 1A would be residential uses, roof surfaces in use for PV panels and plant, and a cross section of 1A showing again that step down site boundary and the closest adjoining properties. Moving to blocks 1B and 1C, these are connected at ground floor level. Again, reminder, 1B, location of some further commercial floor space and residential amenity space. Also note that attached to block 1C, there's a proposed terrace of 3-storey townhouses. These are shown here, annotated as block 2D. In terms of elevations, the top elevations show 1B and 1. This is 1B. This is the edge of 1A, and 1B. This is the elevation facing Queen's Road, and the elevation below, south elevation facing towards the southern boundary, and the townhouses that I mentioned previously, you can see in this street frontage. In terms of the design approach and building typology, the design and access statement points to the city wall as a point of reference for both block 1B and 1E, and this has influenced the gradient of colour of materials across these elevations and the use of brick detailing, including corbelling, to create texture. In terms of block 1C and 1D, Victoria Railway Station, previously on the site, has influenced the design, particularly the design, the treatment of the ground floor and first floor, which incorporates these kind of tall, arched features, which replicate the features which were incorporated within the original Victoria Station building. In terms of side elevations, these are side elevations of block 1B. Again, the red dashed line on this side of the image showing the boundary of the site with Queen's Road, showing how block 1B steps down towards the home zone. And then in this cross section here, you can see the nearest proposed townhouse block and then the site boundary. Side elevations of block 1C, Queen's Road on this side, block stepping down towards the home zone, the closest duplex block, and then the site boundary with Victoria Street. Upper floors of blocks 1B and C, again residential. 8th floor you can see the residential amenity area at that level with access onto an external terrace. Blocks 1D and 1E connected at ground floor level to the pavilion building. Again, the location of residential amenity area as well as ground floor residential units. Top elevation is the elevation facing Queen's Road. Block 1D, adopting the typology of the Victoria Station, and Block 1E, adopting the typology of the City Wall. Side elevations showing the step down towards the home zone, and then the closest duplex block. Upper floors in residential use. Okay, moving to the townhouse blocks. So just a reminder as to where they are. There are two locations for townhouses. One location to the north of the home zone attached to block 1C, and then another location to the south, block 2A. These plans show you ground, first, second floor, and then the roof plan. The top elevation is the elevation facing towards the home zone, facing north. So 3-storey townhouses with the upper floor within the roof space, dormers facing north towards the home zone. The elevation below is the south elevation facing the boundary with Victoria Street. Moving to the duplex blocks, you can see here the location, two of them, each accommodating, just bear with me, 12 apartments. And we have here ground, first, second, and third floor plans. The duplexes, there would be a lower duplex split between ground floor and first floor, an upper duplex split between second floor and third floor, the third floor being accommodated within the roof space. The upper duplex would be accessed via a central core here, and a open decked access, which would provide access to the kind of front door of that upper duplex. And if I show you the next image, that might become clearer. So that decked access is located behind these brick piers and railings. And then, so this is the elevation facing south towards the Victoria Street boundary, and the upper floor would include dormers to those bedrooms accommodated within the roof space. And that is an elevation of the duplex block looking north towards the home zone. And they are longer elevations of those duplex blocks. There's just a number of cross sections here. This is the cross section showing block 1A, the step down, the closest property on Victoria Street, block 1B, stepping down, the townhouse proposed adjacent to that block, the boundary, closest properties on Victoria Street. The same with block 1C. 1D, stepping down, duplex block, boundary with Victoria Street properties sitting at a higher level. And the last one, block 1E, stepping down, duplex block, and the adjacent residential properties sitting at that higher level. In terms of landscape, this is the landscape master plan. This illustrates the approach to spaces within and around the proposed development. Trees are an important feature, in particular those along the site frontage. They are covered by TPOs. On this plan, the circles represent trees. Those without a cross represent existing trees that are all being retained. Those with a cross denote new trees, and the pink circles denote trees that would be removed as a result of the development. The issue of tree loss is covered in the report that you have before you today. You'll note from the report that the various proposed spaces will have different characters and functions. There's parkland proposed along the frontage. I've got a few slides here just kind of showing the different characters of spaces proposed across the site. The first one, you've seen this one before, but this is that proposed parkland adjacent to Queen's Road. This would be intended for use by the public. It would have seating, it would incorporate play spaces and a fitness trail. Natural play would also feature in the nature gardens proposed in the southern sector of the site. And then some images here of other spaces proposed at St. Stephen's Gardens, which would front the entrance from St. Stephen's Road and would wrap around block 1A. The central square, which would sit behind the pavilion building, this would include a rain garden. An image within the home zone, showing areas of planting and tree planting and seating. And an example of the treatment of a residence courtyard area, which is intended to be a kind of multi-use area for use by residents. That's the end of the presentation of the scheme, and I apologise for taking quite a long time doing that, but it is a detailed application, so there are lots of plans and elevations to show, but I hope that's given you a good understanding of the proposed development. I'm not proposing to take you through the full assessment, which is contained within the report, but I do want to touch on a couple of the key issues. And I want to start with the principle of development. You'll note from the report that this is not an allocated site in the Greater Norwich Local Plan, but the site is brownfield. It's of a significant size. It's located within the city centre, and it's a highly sustainable location for residential development. Ease of access to a wide range of facilities, services, public transport creates the right conditions for high density development with low car dependency. And the NPPF requires that planning decisions should give substantial weight to the value of using brownfield sites for new homes, and that proposal should be approved unless substantial harm would be caused. Furthermore, residential development of this site would directly support Greater Norwich Local Plan Policies 1 and 7.1 in terms of meeting housing targets and the objective of focusing homes in sustainable locations, and support and strengthen the strategic role of the city centre as a location for high density mixed-use development. The number of homes is significant, more so given the lack of a 5-year land supply. And for decision makers, this triggers the tilted balance. The NPPF requires planning permission to be granted unless there are strong reasons for doing so centred on protected areas or assets, or any adverse impacts of doing so would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. So there is a very strong policy context to supporting the principle of development to the site. And in terms of the planning balance, substantial weight should be attached to the reuse of the brownfield site for housing, and significant weight to the number of homes proposed, given the potential for the windfall site to boost housing delivery at a time of deficit. In terms of the type of housing, a build-to-rent scheme is proposed, a new product for Norwich, but not for other parts of the country. The report includes information about this housing type, but key aspects include that it's a form of housing built and designed to provide homes for rent for the long term. The development would be in single ownership with the flats, internal and external spaces all being centrally managed. Rents would include service charges, broadband, etc. And in the case of this proposal, would also include furnishings and access to shared communal facilities, including the gym and co-working spaces. So it's a new rental product and one which, through shared facilities, is aimed at fostering communal living. The question of how this would fit into Norwich's housing market has been considered by the strategic housing manager, and he's here today to answer any questions you might have. But you will note that he supports BTR, build to rent, as a new rental option, as the rental sector is and will need to continue to be an important element of meeting the city's housing need. The question of affordability is considered in detail in the report, and affordability has been considered in its broadest sense. Greater Norwich Local Plan Policy 5 requires housing schemes in the city centre to include 28% of proposed homes as affordable homes to meet a local housing need for social and affordable homes and low-cost home ownership. However, importantly, NPPF is explicit that for build-to-rent schemes, unless local policies have considered this distinct housing asset, then affordable requirements should be as set out in the National Planning Practice Guidance, which forms part of the NPPF. And that is that it should be 20% of the total and that there should be a minimum rent reduction of 20%. The planning practice guidance is also clear that these homes are managed as part of the wider housing offer and they're not transferred to a registered provider, as in the case of other forms of affordable housing. The application has been accompanied by a financial viability assessment. This has been independently reviewed on behalf of the Council by Abson Young. This review has included a full assessment of values, development costs, and has included a cost audit undertaken by a quantity surveyor. And this has determined that it's not viable for the development to make any provision for affordable homes. However, you will note that the applicant has worked with the Council to try and make some form of provision. And having regard to the NPPF and the build-to-rent development, he has made an offer to provide 10% of homes as private affordable homes with a rent reduction of 20%. And set out in the report are the factors the applicant has taken into account in making this offer. The Strategic Housing Manager has advised that having regard to market rents in Norwich and various measures of affordability, these rents are unlikely to be affordable to residents on the housing options list and in need of homes at social or affordable rents, i.e. the type of need that's identified in the local housing needs assessment. However, 10% of homes available at a lower rent will broaden the range of residents able to afford to live at this development and support the creation of a more balanced community. The National Planning Practice Guidance makes specific recommendations regarding matters that ought to be secured by Section 106 in relation to BTR, private affordable homes, and the applicant has confirmed agreement to these. Given the affordable housing position, it's recommended that in the event of planning approval, the Section 106 should include a viability review mechanism, and that given the scale of the development and the duration of the construction programme, it is proposed and the applicant has agreed to a viability review in the event of delayed commencement, delayed occupation, and importantly, at a fixed point of 50% occupation of the development, where it is demonstrated that it is viable to make affordable housing provision, a commuted sum would be sought for the council to use for off-site provision. The applicant has agreed to that review mechanism. The applicant has set out a delivery programme for the development. BTR investors given that they are building to hold an asset for the long term, are able to take a longer view on viability. As such, notwithstanding the current viability position, there is a good prospect of the development coming forward and the homes being built. Turning to the issue of design and heritage, the report includes a detailed design assessment, and I've taken you through the development block by block. Informing the assessment have been verified views that have been provided, 29 in all. These show the development in the context of the surroundings in long, medium and short distance views of the development. And at this stage, I just want to take an opportunity to take you through some of those verified views. This plan just shows the locations where we've had a view provided. And the first group that I'm going to show you are views from within the Newmarket Road Conservation Area. So as I go through these, you'll note that the development is visible to varying degrees. So from St. Stephen's Road, if I highlight it here with my pointer, this only part of the development would be visible, and it would be block 1A, just rising above the roof line of properties fronting St. Stephen's Road. As you get closer to the development, existing development in the foreground substantially kind of obscures views, substantial views of the development. Again, we're in the Newmarket Conservation Area here. As you approach the proposed site entrance, the development does become visible. In this view, you can see block A with its step down towards the entrance from St. Stephen's Road. See the gable of the townhouse in the distance. Moving just beyond that entrance, block 1A would sit behind these trees in the foreground. Moving to the other side, in fact just outside the boundary of the conservation area, looking down Brazen Gate towards the city centre and Sainsbury's, block 1E would be visible from this position. Stepping around the corner, looking towards the corner of Victoria Street, which is within the conservation area. Again, 1E, block 1E would be visible. But there are trees along that boundary which would filter views, particularly when those trees are in leaf. Stepping across the road, properties on Victoria Street. I've mentioned they're in the conservation area. They are listed, many of them. Parts of the development would be visible from this location. You would just see those kind of upper stories of blocks rising above the prevailing roof line. As you move through the conservation area, your experience of the development will change. As you're on Victoria Street itself, the buildings on the street frontage would obscure views. It's another view from Victoria Street. From Wood Street, this is view 3, so this is from this location looking kind of northeast towards the site. Development would be visible from this location, as would have been Victoria House, which is shown in the dashed blue line on this image. Kingsley Road, again, development would be visible through gaps between buildings. You can see block 1A and 1B visible in this view. And you can also see the outline of Victoria House. So Victoria House would have also been previously visible from this location. Regina Road, you can see the development rising above the prevailing roofscape of Victoria Street in this instance. Victoria House would not have been visible in this location previously. This is a photograph just giving you an illustration of the outlook that residents on Victoria Street currently have. Clearly, those properties that back onto the site boundary currently have views across the site, and at ground floor level, these are views kind of across boundary fences and walls, and you can see here development on Queen's Road is visible from that level. As you step up to the kind of first floor level, you can see into the site, across the site towards Queen's Road. So for residents on Victoria Street backing onto the site, the development will be highly visible and will result in significant change to their outlook. This is acknowledged in the report. Victoria House, previously visible, and in certain places highly visible, but the proposed development, given its site coverage and height, will have a significantly greater presence. Just now moving to a kind of group of views from the city centre conservation area. This is a view from St Stephen's Street, looking across St Stephen's roundabout. You can see here in this view, this is block 1A with its splayed corner, and you can see the flank elevation of block 1B with the trees retained on the site frontage. Another image just taken a bit further round on Chapelfield Road. Yeah. And this is taken further along towards the entrance to Chancery Place with the city wall in the foreground. This is the development here, block 1A, and the series of blocks that then follow along Queen's Road. Moving along Queen's Road, I've included in the corner of this image the previous view of Victoria House, which is clearly now gone, so the bottom view kind of shows that existing site conditions. But in this view, block 1E is clearly visible, and then the other blocks set behind that parkland area with the trees retained on the frontage. Again, block 1E from Brazengate. And then as you step back into the conservation area further away from the site, this is from Surrey Street, the bus station entrance, the development in the foreground starts to obscure your views of the development. So the development would be visible in this view, in this location, just one element of the development. From All Saints Green, Surrey Street, the development becomes visible just between these two buildings here, the student accommodation and Ivory House. Queen's Road, further along, looking down towards the site. And as you get further away, kind of buildings in the foreground start to substantially obscure views of the new development. In terms of long distance views and those views that are identified in the local plan, in terms of being important views of the cityscape, the development will either not be visible or will only change your view to a small degree. I think in this view you will see two of the blocks just on the horizon. In this view from Mottram Monument, the development would not be visible. And this one from Mousehold Avenue would not be visible. And this is taken from Norwich Castle. So in terms of the overall conclusion in terms of design and heritage impact, overall it's considered that having regard to the design criteria that have been used to assess the scheme, that the development has been designed to provide a high quality and attractive living environment, and that the development will have a strong sense of place drawn from both the architectural expression of the buildings and the landscape spaces that surround them. It's acknowledged that the development, which seeks to optimise the use of the city centre site, is dense, and that compared to Victoria House, the blocks, although no higher, do extend over parts of the site that were not previously developed and will become closer to the site boundaries. In townscape terms, viewed from certain locations, the change will be significant, and given the site is adjacent to 2 conservation areas and listed buildings, this change will have some heritage impact, and residents living close to the site, particularly those on Victoria Street, will experience a high magnitude of change. In terms of heritage, the assessment sets out in detail where residual harm has been identified. In particular, less than substantial harm is identified to the setting of Newmarket Conservation Area, extent judged to be low by Historic England and low to moderate by the Council's Conservation and Design Officer. The report includes a table identifying all relevant designated and undesignated assets. The Council's Conservation Officer finds a range of impact. Where harm is found, it's to the setting, is less than substantial, and ranging in extent from limited to low, but no higher than moderate. To limit impact both on heritage, townscape, and on residential visual amenity, a number of planning conditions are recommended. These include those recommended by the Council's Conservation and Design Officer and Landscape Officers, which include conditions to ensure high quality materials are used, that effective brick detailing is deployed to create the texture and relief that is proposed. Controls over the siting and detailing of the rooftop plant, and to ensure a high quality landscape scheme, including a strategy for reinforcing planting along the southern boundary of Victoria Street. The residual harm that has been identified, none of which has been judged to be substantial in magnitude, needs to be weighed in the planning balance against the benefits of the development. And this balance is carried out in the concluding section of the report. Paragraph 332 lists those public benefits, and they are weighed first against the level of heritage harm that has been identified. The NPPF requires great weight to be given to the conservation of designated assets. A number of public benefits have been identified. All of these carry weight, substantial in the case of the beneficial use of a brownfield site, and significant in relation to the delivery of 432 homes. Significant in relation to the delivery of 432 new homes within the city. Having carried out this balance, it's judged these benefits outweigh the heritage harm, and as such there is no strong reason for refusing planning permission on those grounds. As a result, given the lack of a 5-year land supply, the tilted balance set out in the NPPF applies, and this requires decision makers to approve planning permission unless any adverse impacts of doing so would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. And this is when assessed against the policies in the framework taken as a whole, but with particular regard to key policies for directing development to sustainable locations, to making effective use of land, securing well-designed places, and providing affordable homes. And on the basis of the assessment set out in the report, the adverse impacts that have been identified would not significantly and demonstrably outweigh the multiple development benefits identified in the report, and that would result from the scheme being delivered. On this basis, the recommendation is that the application should be approved, subject to the imposition of planning conditions which are listed at the end of the report. Section 106, securing matters detailed in paragraph 326, and the securing of nutrient mitigation credits for the scheme. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Tracy. Sorry about my cough and fit, but we will move on. We've got two objectors here which to speak, and you have 3 minutes each to speak, and the first one is Jackie Mitchell. Thank you.
Thank you. My concerns regarding the height of the development, and it will obstruct some natural light from our homes on Victoria Street. It will overshadow our house and have a negative effect on our quality of life. And I read with astonishment that the overall height of the former Victoria House building has been calculated taking into account the rooftop plant, which in effect amounts to a shed on the top of the roof and not the building of Victoria Street itself, which I believe did contain some air conditioning equipment. And it covered no more than perhaps 10% of the total roof space. And using this as a measurement for the height of the entire tallest block is surely finding or exploiting an architectural loophole to build 9 stories high rather than genuinely and accurately to the 8-storey height that was Victoria House. This ingenuous, perhaps deceptive measurement goes against the original pledge given to residents by Xive Capital that their new building will be no higher than the existing building, and I contend that the building should be no more than the actual height of the Victoria House building itself. Turning to Block 1A, this block will overshadow the rear of our garden as the largest section is 8 stories high, and it calls stepping down, but it moves down a mere 3 stories to 5 stories, which in itself will tower over our 2-storey house. It was stated here there was no building there from the Victoria House site, still parking it back to the railways, which it was there. This was merely a railway line. It was never a station building per se. The Norwich Society called Block 1A an incongruous build and incompatible with the overall plans. I agree with this view and would like to know why the Council is seeking to approve the plans for Block 1A as they stand. It should be 2 or 3 stories in height, both to blend in with the proposed new housing and the 2-storey housing on Victoria Street. There seems to have been no account and nothing said this morning about the impact of noise from around 500 plus people living and working in such close proximity to our homes. And it was identified this morning about this veranda terrace, which will be available to residents throughout the evening and night. It does not appear that any noise assessment has been made to the proximity of our homes and gardens. And why not, is my question. And it will, as has been stated, kept talking about access to the site. The road will be a public thoroughfare of 24-hour access running along the rear of our gardens, not access and put any nearer the big housing, but right alongside us. So to recap, the current plans for this development will overshadow our house, obstruct some natural light and have a negative impact on the quality of life for ourselves and those living at the St Stephen's end of Victoria Street. And I think it should be reviewed on that basis.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jackie, no?
No, Joe.
It's Joe Wall. Thank you very much. Jack's just spoken. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm a resident of Victoria Street and my property joins the boundary of my objection is very specific and I want to raise the impact of the proposed block 2B, which is the 4-storey duplex at Victoria Street boundary. The issue is one of height and layout and the result of overlooking. This block is only going to be 20 metres from my house. contains first floor living spaces with the balcony and external walkway, positioned at a level that's directly aligned with the bedroom, bathroom windows in the current garden. And this creates an unacceptable degree of overlooking and loss of privacy. If I draw your attention to the elevations, excuse me, on page 121, it clearly shows how imposing the location of these townhouses would be in relation to the existing houses on Victoria Street. Regardless of the difference in height level, it still means that the balcony, the walkways, the direct face our bedrooms are. So this combination of height, proximity, and the walkways results in a level overlooking all of these material harm to residential community. The local plan requires developments to protect the immunity of existing residents and to ensure that impacts such as overlooking and privacy are appropriately mitigated, particularly site boundaries. And this proposed mitigation of hedges, I don't believe, is sufficient to prevent the adverse immunity. The planning officer's report in section 203 acknowledges that the effect on existing residential immunity is adverse and is negative, and explicitly states that the applicant gives insufficient weight to the magnitude of change in massive density. Crucially, the harm that I'm raising here is very localised and entirely possible to avoid. It affects just this one plot of the block of the overall 432 homes, and it doesn't undermine the wider development and the generation benefits of the scheme as a whole. A modest reduction in height of that particular block to match the proposed townhouses block 2A would remove that adverse immunity for my family and my immediate neighbours, and whilst leaving the risk of development unchanged. However, I do support it in raising that particular point. The committee needs to be satisfied that the design fully complies with immunity policies, and in this instance, I think that the modest reduction in height to match block 2A would remove the acknowledged harm entirely. And so for these reasons, I ask that if you are reminded to approve the application, that you do so subject to the amendment plan for block 2B, so that the development will be in a form that complies with residential immunity standards.
Thank you. We now got the applicant here, which is Adam Zive, I believe.
That's correct.
And you have 6 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the Planning Committee, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Adam Zive from Zive Capital. The principals of Zive Capital provided equity funding for over 35 residential real estate projects, predominantly in Toronto, Canada, with a particular focus on regeneration-led mixed-use developments in urban areas, similar to what we're doing at Victoria House. It's always a pleasure to be in Norwich, a fine city with enormous further potential. Over the past 2 years, we've worked very closely with officers, the community, and statutory consultees to bring forward an 80 million plus world-class build-to-rent development at Victoria House. We've worked very hard to ensure that development respects the historical character of Norwich and, in our view, of the residents of Victoria Street, which is reflected in both the design and quality of the scheme, but also in the responses received from Historic England as well as the Norwich Society. This proposal would deliver 432 new professionally managed homes, including 10% affordable housing, regeneration of a highly prominent brownfield site, new public gardens, play space, startup office accommodation for local businesses, and high-quality rental homes that will attract and retain young professionals and graduates in Norwich. In particular, given the site's close proximity to major employers such as Aviva, the scheme will strengthen Norwich's ability to attract and retain talented people building their careers in this city. Importantly, the master plan creates what will be one of the highest quality BTR environments in the UK, a development that Norwich can be genuinely proud of. And we note that the quality of the master plan has been specifically recognized by the Norwich Society. Located directly opposite the city's main bus station, the development places sustainability at its core, targeting BREEAM Excellent with no on-site carbon emissions heat pumps and solar panels, a 62% reduction in regulated carbon emissions, and operational energy demand that's 70 to 80% lower than the average rental stock in Norwich. We have also reused or recycled over 99% of the materials from the demolition. The proposal includes 622 secure cycle spaces, a large number, visitor cycle parking, provision for barrel bikes, limited car parking to encourage active travel, biodiversity net gain, green roofs, pollinator-friendly gardens, and the planting of more than 100 new trees. We've engaged extensively with the local community, including online and in-person consultation, as well as door knocking along Victoria Street, resulting in meaningful changes to the scheme, which include reducing the height of the Queens Road buildings so they're no higher than the former Victoria House, and stepping down the buildings towards the south of the site. We've also introduced a substantial landscaped home zone to the southern edge of the site, with private gardens backing onto the existing private gardens on Victoria Street, and have retained the existing foliage along the southern boundary to maintain privacy and soften views for residents. Independently assessed viability evidence shows that the scheme is not required to provide affordable housing. However, we've taken a long-term approach and are still proposing 10% affordable through discount market rent, which is the form of affordable housing provision specifically identified within the NPPF for build to rent. This equates to 50% of the policy requirement and is equal to or greater than the affordable provision of many notable large-scale projects in Norwich, in what is now a much more difficult macro environment, with elevated construction costs and yields this week on long-term gilts hitting their highest levels since 1998. That being said, we own this site outright, putting us in a position where we can deliver. Provided that permission is granted, we expect construction to commence in 2028 with occupation in 2030. A vote in favor of our proposal today is a vote for sustainability, investment, regeneration, housing delivery, and the continued success of Norwich, a fine city that this development will make even finer. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. We're now moving on to any questions to David.
Sorry, can we come back on a couple of points?
You can come back on a couple of points raised.
In no particular order, reference to the roof terrace. I just want to kind of point out precisely where this is. The roof terrace is to the north, kind of explicitly guided by trying to reduce that risk of overlooking, and hence the decked access. The decked access isn't intended to be a balcony, it is just purely for access to that duplex, upper duplex unit. So doors and windows at that second floor level will be set back behind that main facade, behind those pillars.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to questions from members now. Anyone got any questions? Jenny, Councillor Knight.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to talk about the Active England consultation and specifically relating to the conflict of active travel and how cycle and pedestrians are likely to come into conflict, and the fact that we're not actually getting a separate cycle path through the development and they will be sharing space with vehicles. I was wondering if that was due to there not being enough space, or if it is possible for a separate cycle path.
Thank you for that question. Just to reassure you that the comments made by Active Travel I have discussed in detail with the local highway authority. And it would be desirable to have separate routes for pedestrians and cyclists, but we've got to work within the constraints of this frontage and work also within the constraints of the significant tree coverage on the Queens Road frontage. To provide a separate route would result in significant tree loss across that frontage, and it's for that reason that we don't think that would be a desirable approach in this case.
If I could just come back on that and ask about the car travel through that actual road. Is there any chance of a provision of a cycle route so that cyclists aren't coming into conflict with car traffic?
Is this the internal access route? Yes, I mean, that is designed as a home zone, a shared space where pedestrians, vehicles all have kind of access to that space on equal terms. So I don't think it would be necessary in that instance, given the low traffic generation. I think that there isn't a concern about safety for cyclists.
Thank you.
Councillor Oliver?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mentioned a few questions down. I was wondering if it's possible to ask about the wider area and the impact. So, for example, the park will be open to the public, which personally I think is great. I wondered about how many security staff or caretakers will be on site. What happens if, for example, in the locality, I've had reports recently, particularly from antisocial behaviour. I know across the ward, with city centre, that's going to happen. How are we going to mitigate that? And some other questions as well, which maybe I should wait my turn. Thank you.
I can't give you information about staffing levels, but what I can assure you is that these types of development are actively managed. So there will be 24-hour management on site. So there is the prospect of ensuring that the spaces around the buildings will be managed effectively. And I think there's CCTV coverage across the site as well. Yes, I mean, compared to other housing schemes, this type of product actually provides more active management on site.
Councillor Lovick.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd like to go back to the issue of the conflict between cyclists and pedestrians, and but particularly with regard to the path along Queen's Road. It's 3 metres wide, so we hear. I mean, is there no possibility of having it slightly wider so that it could be segregated, so that when people pedestrians move along that road, that path, they have some idea where the cyclists are going to be, perhaps on the outside of that path. We've had lots of examples in the city where we have shared cycle use with pedestrians, and quite frankly, it does put people off, mainly pedestrians walking those routes. Now, if they're slow and if they don't hear a cyclist coming, it can be very intimidating. The number of times I've asked for a line down the middle to segregate, even though it is perhaps only just over 3 metres, just to have the idea that the cyclists are not going to be on the inside of the pavement, they're going to be on the outside, gives people some feeling of protection. And when you think of the electric cycles, electric delivery drivers whizzing along, we don't want to make more issues of preventing people walking. So if we could just find a little bit more space, not as completely segregated cycle route, but just a little bit more space to then put a white line down and put cyclists on the outside of that path and pedestrians on the inside, until of course you come to the crossing point, but it just gives some security for pedestrians, especially the elderly, especially those with limited sight and hearing, who are particularly affected by these shared uses. But on a more general level, I have some other concerns about the social housing and the provision for contributions to health facilities. Now, I've read the report thoroughly, and I understand why both of those gains cannot come out of this. I do understand it, and I completely respect the viability assessment that has been brought in by the council to ensure that there is no opportunity from this site, apart from the reduction in the rent for those, was it 10% or 10 properties? I can't remember. And I welcome that. I do welcome that. But my point is that both with the social...
to the officers at the moment. We're just on questions.
Yeah, both with the social housing and with the doctors, it seems to me that we aren't going to get what we want out of developers on those two scores. And I think, you know, it's not an issue for this for debate here today, but I think I am understanding that we're not going to get any money towards health facilities. It's got to come from somewhere else. But despite that, I am still in favour of the application, because I think you can't squeeze so much out of developers, and we're already getting the SIL and the nutrient neutrality, which comes to over 5 million. But I mean, obviously the officers can't answer that now. It's a debate for another time. But I just wanted to say that I have concerns, but I don't think they're going to be answered here today. Thank you.
Excuse me, Chair. Excuse me, Chair.
You're not allowed to say anything anymore, I'm afraid. You're not allowed to.
Sorry, Chair. Just we are on questions, Chair.
Yes.
Thank you.
I can just come back on the question you had about that the 3 metre route across the frontage, because that was a question about can some additional space not be found. I mean, I've just put up the plan showing the tree coverage on the site, and I think this shows that there is dense tree coverage across the site, and I think if you're going to be finding additional space, it is going to be the expense of trees. So in terms of safety, I mean, this extract from the transport assessment, this is a preliminary proposal. The Highway Authority have looked at this preliminary proposal. It has gone to their development team for comment. They are they've asked for this as a requirement, so they are content with what is proposed. In terms of its detailed design, that will be subject to a planning condition that will require that detailed scheme to be provided, and that detailed scheme will be subject to a safety audit. So, and that is the case for highway works both on Queen's Road and on Brazengate. So I think the answer to your question is I don't think additional space can be provided without loss of trees.
I've got one question I'd like to ask. What's stopping traffic going through the site and coming out the other end? Like having a shortcut?
Well, the road, I don't believe the road is being offered for adoption, so it will be a private road. So I would imagine there'll be some signage at the entrance making it clear that it is a private route.
Okay. Any more questions? Not discussions, questions. I'll go to Councillor Fox first because you were asked one. Then Councillor Stubley, Councillor Giles, and I'll work everyone else out. Suddenly everyone want a question.
My question is around like the provision for sewage, because it says that it will be going to the Whitlingham treatment plant. We know that the Whitlingham treatment plant already has like problems, and the sewage is being released into our river because of...
What's the question?
Yeah, I am...
You're going into a different subject completely.
Yeah, I'm getting to the question. Sorry, lost my train of thought now. Yeah, so with that fact, and the fact that Anglia Water have said that they can't currently cope with any more addition to that. I know that Anglia Water we have to put the burden on them to provide that additional provision. But how can we be assured that that will happen, because currently enforcement isn't happening? Is this going to just be creating more poo going into our river, I guess is what I'm asking.
Thank you, Councillor Fox. We're working quite closely with Anglian Water about their proposals to improve capacity at Whittlingham, specifically where all our kind of sewerage waste goes. They're currently working up a planning application to increase that capacity, which they would obviously be currently submitting to the Norfolk County Council as the Minerals and Waste Authority. They are under a directive from government to increase capacity at Whittlingham by 2030. You have heard from the applicant today that they intend to start on the site circa 2028, with first occupation being achieved in 2030. So we are content that there will be capacity at the point of occupation of this development. And as I say, we continue to work with Anglian Water to ensure that they are going to adhere to that directive and be able to support growth and development across the City Council area.
Thank you. Councillor Studio, I think, was next.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report and presentation. Just in relation to a point raised by one of the objectors about the height of this building, I remember a conversation I had with you, David, a few years ago when this first came, and you said, when I speculated that it might be a high-rise development, you suggested that they'll be restricted by the current height, or the height before demolition. Is this a technical issue that has been exploited, and is that what you meant?
I don't specifically recall the conversation, I'm afraid, but regardless, it's the impact of the proposed development that we need to assess, regardless of how high it is in relation to the previous building on the site. So, in essence, if it were acceptable to go higher than Victoria House, then there's no reason why they couldn't. There's nothing in legislation or regulations or anything like that that says they couldn't go higher than Victoria House. But we're here to assess the impact of what they put in front of us and whether or not that is acceptable. In terms of the impact upon the street scene and the townscape, the height of Victoria House has been kind of taken as like a benchmark, but essentially it's not in and of itself a restriction on the form of development.
Councillor George.
Thank you. So the first thing I wanted to raise was page 50, paragraph 167E, and it stops in the event of, and it doesn't finish that paragraph. I apologise if an email's gone round finishing that paragraph. I haven't assessed, but I don't know if it's... So the final lines, in the event of, and then stop.
Apologise for that. I think what it was going to say is that in the event of the viability review, demonstrating that it is viable to provide an affordable housing provision, we would actually seek, and I think I said this in the presentation, we would seek a commuted sum for off-site provision. I apologise for that.
I presume it would work the other way around as well. If it proved less viable at that review stage, is that correct?
the way the viability review works is it doesn't go down. It can go up, but it doesn't go down.
Okay, thanks for that. And the other two things I wanted to raise were page 74, paragraph 275, regarding the applicant offered to fund improvements to the underpass. And I'm conscious the underpass is, particularly unpleasant gateway to the city centre, and wondered if it's possible to have some further explanation of why that wasn't taken up. And the third thing was page 81, paragraph 313, regarding our response to the concerns raised by the ICB about healthcare capacity and the response to that. And obviously I appreciate why it wasn't included in the SIL schedule when it was drawn up several years ago, but I wondered if, perhaps as a broader policy point, whether that needs to be reflected on in the context of the challenges facing the NHS now.
Thank you. If I just come back on the issue of the underpass, I think I set out in the paragraph why it's considered, why we consider it the seeking a contribution would not meet the test for a condition for a contribution. But I suppose, well, let me just go back to the. Sorry, just bear with me. But just to show the site plan. There are three ways of crossing from the site to get to the city centre. There's via the underpass, there's a new crossing near to the bus station entrance, and then there's a crossing also at the junction of All Saints Green and Queen's Road. So there is a choice of routes for pedestrians, and I think that has also been relevant to the Highway Authority when they've been considering pedestrian facilities. So they haven't identified that as necessary to make the development acceptable, and that is the key test for whether we can require a commuted sum via an obligation.
Councillor Hampton.
Thank you, Chair. Just to come back on the question regarding the community infrastructure levy, we are quite cognizant of the fact we adopted our community infrastructure levy quite some time ago for various reasons that hasn't been updated to this point. I think in the context of developing the new Greater Norwich Local Plan 2045, officers are currently considering whether now is the pragmatic time to do that. There are benefits of doing it, there are disbenefits of doing it. Obviously moving through into devolution and local government reorganisation, we need to consider that timing quite carefully. We will be making that decision and then discussing that with Cabinet as necessary in the future.
Thank you, Councillor Hampton.
I think the main question I had has largely been covered about the height and whether it's been compared to the former building just as a benchmark, or because there would be restrictions going above that, so that was good. But a smaller one, also picking up on some of what the speakers said, and I think a lot of your response covered some of the questions I had coming out of that, so thank you. But I think it was also mentioned about overshadowing and obstructing natural light from those properties on Victoria Street. Could you talk to how much we think that is going to be an impact, kind of what consideration's been given to that?
Yes, if I could just refer you to main issue 5, which relates to amenity in the report. The first part of this section deals with the question of daylight and sunlight impact and the methodology that has been used to consider the relationship of the proposed development to existing properties that adjoin the site. Yes, sorry, it's page 68. So you'll note from that assessment that, by using the methodologies that are recommended in BRE guidance, that those assessments do not indicate that there will be a significant impact on sunlight or daylight to properties on Victoria Street.
Councillor Lawson?
Thank you, Chair. Just following up on that, also thank you to the officers for the report. On page 69 at paragraphs 238 and 239, where it states distance in metres from the rear of the closest existing properties on Victoria Street, are those distances to the actual houses or to the end of the bottom of the back garden, so to speak?
The 27 metres is back to back. So it's between the closest properties on Victoria Street and the facade of Block 1A.
The actual building, not the plot of land?
Yeah, that's correct. It's from building to building.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. I've got one or two people who want to ask another question. Councillor Oliver first.
Thank you. So objectors raised concerns about traffic and cars going through the site, and we've heard a bit more about that. I suppose I was curious about, there's spaces for 60 cars on site, but whilst the building's in progress, how will that be managed? Because it seems to me like inevitably there's going to be more vehicles, more coming and going, more disturbance. And just as a kind of considering the trees as well, it's lovely to see so many trees. It seems that mitigation is dependent on the trees being quite mature, and I wondered how big the trees will be roughly when they are planted. Or are the illustrations more suggestive of something in 5 or 10 years' time? Thank you.
Just in terms of construction management, there isn't flexibility here as to where the access can be accessed from. The site can be accessed from. So we do have fixed points of access, but there's a recommendation for a construction environmental management plan that will cover access. There's also a highway authority condition which relates to traffic, which will look at routing of traffic. Those management plans will include hours of operations, etc. So that period of construction will be subject to that control. What was the other one? Trees. Oh yes, trees. In terms of the detailed planting scheme, that would be subject to the landscape condition. Things like the size of the trees when they're planted is something that we would agree at that detailed stage. And I agree that we would want trees of reasonable stature to go in the first instance. But there's always a balance between planting trees and making sure they survive. It's easier to get trees to survive if they are, the younger they are. So it's the balance, but the trees would be planted that have some impact initially, and obviously then would mature over time.
Councillor Lloyd.
Thank you, Chair. I sort of have two questions really to wrap up with. First of all, I found it quite difficult to actually read up on this, because a lot of the extra documents were labelled as historic transfer instead of their proper name. So I would just ask officers to make sure that they are labelled correctly, so that it's easy for us and members of the public to review these documents before we come into planning. But I do want to praise the landscape portion, particularly 85, which I believe asks a question for me. Which I'll read it verbatim. I would like to understand why this couldn't be both the drainage infrastructure and an active area with regards to the SUDS drainage provision and the portion of the courtyard. So some designs, use and access of the green space at the heart of the courtyard would extend the anticipated use as a social and informal community space, given that the area is limited for pop-ups and community once the movement corridors have been accommodated. My question is why isn't it both drainage and active area like laid out here? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, you'll note from the report that the landscape officer has suggested that those detailed aspects of how those spaces will function and be designed to be subject to a condition. I think she feels that there ought to be a better balance of function there, and we would seek to secure that in the detailed lighting scheme.
Thank you. Councillor Lovett.
Yes, my question is about investment and jobs. The opportunity for jobs will come at the construction stage mostly. Is there any way that this council can work with organisations such as City College and other organisations to prepare for a workforce to be ready to take up those opportunities in 2028 should the application proceed?
Chair, if I could just come in on that. So there are numerous large-scale developments and regeneration happening in the city. So we've already opened up those conversations with City College to see what those opportunities may be. We've certainly got Anglia Square, for example, which I'm kind of leading on. We're having those conversations. I'm sure that we could have those conversations with the applicant as well and kind of bring those other larger scale developments into play.
Very helpful, thank you.
Councillor Stooley.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a series of questions on the active travel arrangements and the response from Active Travel England. So I'll just read them out in one go, if I may. So can officers clarify whether Active Travel England's concerns have now been fully resolved and whether ATE currently support the application? Can Active Travel England's concerns regarding compliance with LTN 1/20, given those concerns, are officers satisfied that these can and should be left to condition rather than resolved before determination? If the detailed highway and cycle infrastructure design is later found not to comply with LTN 1/20, what mechanism would exist to revisit the permission? Does the Council consider the current shared use arrangement on Queen's Road to represent best practice for pedestrian safety, disabled users and cyclists in a major city centre development? And finally, has any consideration been given to requiring segregated cycling infrastructure within the site boundary, as suggested by Active Travel England? Thank you.
Active travel, I mean, we, as reported in the report that you have, is the kind of latest comment from Active Travel England. So we haven't gone back to Active Travel England, but what we have done is to have a detailed discussion with the Highway Authority on the points that they've raised. So the scheme that you have in, before you today, and the preliminary highway works that are proposed, do not comply with what active travel are asking for. They suggest a condition which requires compliance with LTA 120. We're not proposing that condition is imposed because we don't believe, and the Highway Authority doesn't believe, that it's that those regulations can be met within the constraints of the existing highway network and within the constraints of the site. So in terms of whether we've considered a segregated cycleway, well, yes, I mean, we don't believe we need one through the site, and certainly we don't believe it's feasible along the Queen's Road frontage.
Any more questions, anyone? Councillor Fox.
Yeah, I just wondered if, so from lessons learned from previous big developments in the city, like following on from your question really about the trees, I know that at the St Anne's development, lots of trees were promised, and the shrub and trees that existed there were cleared, and a concrete pad put down, an underground car park put in. The underground car park still stands empty, the concrete pad is still there, and the trees on that particular part of the St Anne's development are still not there 10 years on. Is there any way that officers or planning law can ensure that the provision, that the trees that have been promised will be put in a certain time frame, or not? I guess I just don't want us to end up in a similar situation where years on we've like still not got that biodiversity in place.
The landscape planning condition would require details of, well, it would require the implementation of the detailed landscaping scheme, and that implementation would generally include a phasing plan for the provision of that landscaping. So it should be secured through the details of approved to discharge the landscape condition.
So with a timeline for that?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll move on now. David.
Sorry, can I just come back on that? It's also, the developer at this point in time has indicated that it's a single phase build. So it's in the interest of the developer for this type of product that it's delivered to ensure that it provides the benefits that it's basically sold on. So I think that there's a greater guarantee in this type for the build to rent product that it will be delivered as shown than perhaps as open market housing.
Councillor Stooley, your question?
Yes, thank you. Apologies for the cough. I do still have, excuse me, I do still have questions on the affordable housing provision, but just to come back on the active travel, just for clarity, this is a consultee that has an objection to the proposal, and presumably they're a consultee because of safety and accessibility concerns that have, and according to their response, they've not been met. What weight should the committee give to that concern, and the fact that it ultimately their concerns are being dismissed on the basis of they can't be met, or the requirements can't be met? For me, that's something that really needs to be answered.
I mean, there's two consultees at play here. There's Active Travel England, and then there's the Local Highways Authority, both the statutory consultees. You've got one statutory consultee saying, in terms of the Local Highways Authority, saying that they are content with the proposals as presented, subject to certain conditions. You've got Active Travel England, who are a national organisation, who are saying that they remain concerned about certain aspects. So you've essentially got two organisations kind of saying slightly different things, and they both cover similar remits. Both have, the Local Highways Authority has a statutory responsibility for road safety, in a way that actually Active Travel England doesn't. They're advisory. They don't have a statutory responsibility for road safety. It's the Local Highways Authority that has that under the provisions of the Highways Act and under other consultation. So that you need to give weight to both considerations, but I don't think you should take, my advice to the committee is that you shouldn't take it from the outstanding issues raised by Active Travel England do not imply that this is unsafe. The Local Highways Authority, who have that statutory responsibility, have reviewed the provisions. They know the limits of the local highway network. I mean, no disrespect to Active Travel England, they don't know the site in the same way that the Local Highways Authority do. So Local Highways Authority have assessed the provision, and they know the constraints, and their conclusion is that it's safe. So I think that's the conclusion of the Local Highways Authority. So we haven't dismissed the issues raised by Active Travel England. We've discussed them with the Local Highways Authority, and we have taken those into consideration when making the recommendation.
All right. Any more questions, Ian?
Thank you. I've got a few questions on the affordable housing, and I'm going to seek some clarity on that. But Chair, you suggested that we'd have a short break at 12 o'clock, and it's reached 12 o'clock.
We are, yes.
So would you like me to proceed with questions or take that break?
Well, depends how many questions you got.
Well,
I know what you're like. You've probably got a whole page written down there somewhere.
I have several questions to which I'd like detailed answers. Please.
Okay. We have to take these questions, so we will have a break now. And if I come back, 20 past? 20 minutes, good enough? Everyone, yeah?
Thank you.
And we come back 20 past 12. And don't forget, you can't discuss this with anyone outside the chamber, outside the meeting. Thank you. Who's coming back? I believe, yes. So we'll start the meeting again of the planning committee, and we're still on to questions. And I think Ian had one or two you want to bring up. Councillor Stupy.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and it relates principally at the moment to the affordability assessment. Affordable housing viability assessment. So the report refers to both zero affordable housing provision and to a later voluntary 10% affordable offer. Can officers clarify again, please, what affordable housing provision is secured through the Section 106 agreement at this stage? Shall I read them all out in one go again? They're all to do with the same subject. Thank you. Why is the viability assessment that the applicant relies upon to reduce the affordable housing offer not published and available for member scrutiny? That is, I couldn't find it. The housing strategy section states that the proposed affordable rented homes are unlikely to meet the needs of households on the housing waiting list. How, therefore, will they be allocated, and what weight should members give to the conclusion? If a 432-home city centre scheme cannot viably provide meaningful affordable housing provision, what confidence can members have that the deliverability of affordable housing policy elsewhere will be viable in the city elsewhere? Excuse me. Please clarify what late-stage viability review and clawback mechanisms will be deployed. Are they designed to capture uplift in values, profit from disposal, and refinancing? Thank you. Oh, there are a couple of follow-ups as well, probably. Thank you.
Who's going to take this?
I think. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Stootley. So the 0 and 10%, just to clarify, the viability showed that zero affordable housing was viable. However, through working with the applicant, they have put forward the offer of 10%, and that is what would be secured through the Section 106. It would be the 10%, 42 homes. 43, sorry. Viability assessment, not public. We understand that it is on the portal, as is the label is historic documents. Okay.
Just to come back on that point, and I meant to address it earlier, so apologies I didn't. Members may or may not be aware we've been going through quite a large digitalisation project in the planning service. We have recently introduced a new document management system, and all our documents have been uploaded, but unfortunately we have just migrated just under 1 million documents, but that has knocked some of the document naming principles out. So we are working to address that. I apologise, they are published, but they haven't been labelled properly, and we are working to sort it as quickly as possible.
Thank you. Ian?
Sorry, just to confirm, it is available, but it does fall under the category that Sarah's just referred to.
Councillor Stootley?
Thank questions that we haven't answered, Chair.
Yeah, there was some other questions in there.
Shall I continue, Chair? Thank you. On the allocation aspects, with build to rent, National Planning Policy Guidance talks about them being under the same ownership as the kind of market rented products, and not needing to require a registered provider to be involved. The allocations, therefore, of the affordable housing will be subject to an annual statement provided by the applicant to the City Council. This will include how they are allocating the properties, which properties are secured as the affordable, what we'll be having a criteria for a cap on earnings for people to be able to go into those units. So all of these will be in an annual statement through to the planning department. But they will be able to allocate them themselves rather than needing to use the home option system. On the way to the conclusion of that, I'll perhaps pass over to...
Do you just want to talk about the viability review mechanism and how that operates?
Yeah, so the viability review mechanism, I can't remember which paragraph it is, so just bear with me. We have suggested certain review points within. Remember what paragraph, sorry, Tracy? Sorry, I can't hear David. 322, where we've laid out certain points at which we would review the development, and that would be if there was a delay to commencement of the development, if it doesn't commence within 24 months of the decision date, in the event that there's no occupation within 40 months of commencement, and if there's at 50% of the development itself. In terms of the review mechanisms and clawbacks, they would be subject to further independent reviews. So we would look again, but there would be certain measures that would be benchmarked. So we would keep the benchmark land value, we would keep the profit level the same as what's been agreed up front in the viability mechanisms as they are now, but then we would be reviewing the rents and the costs of the development and seeing if there was additional affordable housing that could have been provided above and what is actually being delivered. The clawback would be, as I think Tracy mentioned in the comment earlier about the missing sentence to Councillor Giles, it would be through the provision of a commuted sum, and then that commuted sum would be safeguarded to deliver further affordable housing in the city. Councillor Stookley asked the question regarding if a scheme of 430 units cannot deliver affordable housing, what confidence have we got? I think sometimes the larger scale, particularly at height buildings at the moment, have significant increased costs around second staircases post-Grenfell. So there are perhaps some additional costs in the typology of the building. We will always look at the viability where an applicant is citing that they can't deliver policy compliance. We will review that externally where required. It should be noted that there's been some time now since the local housing needs assessment was done in 2021. We are going through a new local plan process. I would expect that there would be a new local housing needs assessment to be delivered as part of that review where we can retest viability. There was an interesting thing posted by a locally renowned construction person on LinkedIn recently that showed over the last 5 years the level of regulation has gone up significantly on development. So we've had biodiversity, again, neutrality, all of these things have been added in Building Safety Act. It's added on average £76,000 to the cost of a new home to be built in that 5-year period. So it's right that we regularly review, and I think that that will be done. I don't know whether Sarah would.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that we're working in a really difficult economy at the moment, and it is affecting development sites, not just here but up and down the country, and even in London they are struggling with the viability of development. As Andrew says, the costs of building have gone up exponentially over the last few years, and prices for sales just aren't kind of meeting and covering those costs. And it is causing pinch points. It's something we need to think really carefully about in the next local plan as we move forward, and we'll be doing that. And as Andrew says, we will be doing a revised local housing needs assessment as part of that process.
Sorry, can I just come back on the weight? I mean, the weight that we've attached to it, we've attached some weight to it. That's set out in paragraph 334 on page 87. I think in making the decision on this application, you have to bear in mind that the policy compliant level of affordable housing will be 0. So the fact that you've got this level of provision being offered up because of the type of product, yeah, you have to attach weight to that, even though it is not policy compliant, but there is an offer on the table to which weight can be attached.
Okay, thank you for those answers. And I think perhaps some of what you've described there about current economic difficulties for developers is, I accept that. I think everybody knows that now. So therefore, that future potential capture, if things improve significantly in the market, is really important. So I just go back to, can we be confident that uplift in values, including profit, if this is flipped? I know we've heard this is a buy to rent long-term project, but it could be flipped to a new provider at any stage. So is that guaranteed to be captured if there's a significant profit in that? Also, actually, the applicant talked about it earlier. The potential for refinancing here is another way to actually increase profit significantly if gilt prices and other refinancing mechanisms change to the benefit of developers.
Yeah, certainly we will be capturing any uplift in value through those key points of review. We wouldn't put in a review every time the applicant wanted to refinance a particular scheme. That's just a business decision that is made by the applicant. And it'd be very difficult for us to understand when and how they were being refinanced at a particular point. So we wouldn't review at that point, but we would review at the key points that have been outlined. And if there's a significant uplift in values or in a reduction in costs at that point, then yes, we would capture that as a commuted sum. So yeah, that's the kind of way we would do it.
If I can add to that, the purpose of the review clauses is twofold. It's, as Andrew outlines, to kind of capture increases and changes in financial situation, but it's also to try and encourage commencement and occupation within set time frames, so the circumstances that we've assessed an application on still pertain at those points in time. So it kind of it does two things.
Stu?
Okay, thank you. I've got one more question after this, but just coming back on that. So the potential for refinancing onwards.
Mechanism for, would you do it for the next 30, 50 years of the life of the development? It's very difficult to kind of track that. And also, how would we know when a refinancing was happening? To me, it's not a reason.
Is silent on some.
Not in place yet. So can you just?
So the affordable housing would be managed in the same way that the private housing would be. So it would be one management organisation, but that through that annual statement to the city council on which properties are being let at an affordable rent, what rents they are at compared to those market rents, and then making sure that we can kind of have that annual statement through to review that to the local planning authority. That's the kind of way we manage that process.
The other one was car use. I mean, there's a car park at the moment, there's hundreds of cars in there going over.
Yes, I mean, in terms of vehicles exiting the site onto Brazengate, there's going to be a significant reduction compared to existing levels or previous levels. I mean, in terms of traffic movement, that will have been considered by the local highway authority to determine whether there's any conflict.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I appreciate there's very likely to be fewer cars because it won't be being used as a car park. So that makes sense, but it's just that particular time in the morning when there's the bus gate. I know locally there's some, it's something that's on the forefront of people's minds, especially when they get accidentally caught by the bus gate. So up until 9:30 or 10, if you're coming from Victoria Street, say, you can't drive through that site. But it's situated before the exit for the new development. So, yeah, I'm just saying there could be perceived unfairness. Anyway.
Well, you can go to Sainsbury's and come back out and get in the morning, can't you?
I've done that and been caught. No, you can't. Until after the regulations no longer apply, so after 10.
Okay.
9:30.
9:30.
Sorry, just to pick up on the bus gate won't be a factor. Its placing means that it doesn't affect the exit arrangements from the site. It'll operate in the same way that it does at the moment. So if you go through it inadvertently, it'll be turn out the site. So it'll be left turn out of the site towards Queen's Road.
Okay, we'll move on to Ian. You've got a question?
Yes, thank you. Just a final one, please. It's so this application has a number of unresolved matters that are going through on conditions. So there's the cycle, the active travel. There's some design and infrastructure elements that are coming late through condition. Would officers accept that this recommendation effectively asks members to place significant reliance on those future conditions and later technical approvals across multiple key areas of this really important scheme?
I think my answer to that point is no more than any other kind of major development. The matters that are reserved by condition don't fundamentally alter the nature of the content of the scheme that's actually in front of you. And yeah, they're no more. I think it's wrong to kind of characterise it as matters coming late to the table. They are simply matters that they are technical matters that can be resolved by condition, and therefore it's appropriate to do so. They won't fundamentally affect the nature of the scheme that is before you. So the NPPF it suggests that they can be addressed by condition.
Okay, excellent. We'll move on now to discussions and proposals, if anyone's got one. Anyone wish to say anything? Councillor Knight.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I just want to, as recommended by Landscape, to put a condition upon having the drainage space also work as a social and informal community space. I'm not exactly sure on how we would word that, but I think that that's a good idea.
That would be covered by the proposed landscape condition.
Yeah.
We'll be making sure that it's a bespoke one, so we'll make sure that it's targeted at the matters that we want to be.
Wonderful, thank you.
Okay, if no one's got a proposal or discussion, I will move the proposal. The recommendation is to approve, and I'll move that. Have I got a seconder? Councillor Lovick, thank you. Anyone else wish to say anything? Councillor Stickley.
Thank you. I recognise that Norwich needs new homes and brownfield generation sites like this have an important role to play in meeting the city's housing needs. However, recognising the need for development does not remove our responsibility as a planning committee to ensure major schemes comply with adopted policy and genuinely serve the long-term interests of the city. This is a highly prominent gateway site, and I do not believe we can afford to get a development of this scale wrong. I remain concerned that there's the Active Travel England concerns are unresolved, but principally my issue is with the affordable housing, and while recognising the viability issues that the applicant faces, I can't support this application. However, answers to questions across the committee today have convinced me that there's no legal reason to vote against this. So I will be abstaining on the basis that there is effectively zero affordable housing provision, and that cannot be acceptable on a development of this scale. Thank you.
Councillor Lovick. Judith?
Sorry. Thank you, Chair. This is a very important and complex development on a sustainable and brownfield site. It's also a Winfield site, which will greatly help the Norwich's provision for housing in the next 5 years. The 432 new residences are very welcome, as is the 80 million of investment and the jobs that it will bring, along with the silk contributions of 2.8 million. There is a strong policy context to support this development. It's in the very comprehensive report, and it was echoed by the officers again this morning. So there is no, in my view, no reason to refuse this. And in giving it permission, I think it will be a very strong indicator for other investors to come to Norwich and invest in the city. It is lamentable that we can't produce affordable housing and NHS contributions as a result of development, but as we have heard that there have been certain legislation that has increased the cost of development, and with nutrient neutrality as well, we are not able to squeeze out of developers those very essential services, and we need to start looking at other ways of providing them, whether it be government money or whatever. You know, at the end of the day, it probably comes to putting up taxes, but that's not popular. But actually, somebody has to pay for those investments into our health service and to housing. And it's going to be a difficult one to get those sorts of contributions out of developers, as well as getting the development that we need to sustain the city. So we're very fortunate to have this before us today in the form it is, and I hope we can embrace it, and I hope that there is a sincere commitment from the developers that they will go ahead with it, and we can look forward to sort of 4 years' time to these extra homes, communities and a community in close to the city centre, and it would be a very vibrant community and one that we need very much. Thank you.
Okay, if no one else wishes to say anything, Councillor Lord.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to note the innovation for Norwich of a build-to-rent scheme, BTR. I welcome BTR as one tool, among others, to address housing need. It's unfortunate that the full quota of affordable homes would not be achieved, but the developer's proposal seems a reasonable compromise. I appreciate the impact on local residents, but note this is considered to be less than substantial, or there is considered to be less than substantial harm to heritage assets, which I believe encompasses this. Finally, I note the public benefits set out in paragraph 332, and so I'm minded to support the application. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Hampden.
Thank you. I'm also minded to support this overall from what we've heard, an imbalance. I think we need to acknowledge that any development of this scale, there is unfortunately always going to be an impact on neighbours, and that is always completely regrettable. But from what we've heard in terms of planning considerations, that doesn't sound substantial enough to outweigh the positives of delivering the scheme, many of which we are obliged to give more substantial weight to, and as ever, this might not be a completely perfect scheme. We've talked about the Active Travel England feedback, and I get that what they're asking for might be sort of ideal or best practice, but I'm giving relatively little weight to that on the grounds that highways, as we've heard, who have the statutory responsibility for road safety, are content. So I don't not have concerns over that, but for these purposes, I'm sort of pushing that down a bit. And it is, as ever, very disappointing that a stronger affordable housing offer can't be provided, but given the viability challenges and the fact that viability suggested that zero affordable housing could be provided, I'm giving some weight to the fact that 10% is set to be secured and reviewed going forward. But on the flip side of the balance, I think obviously substantial weight needs to be given to the fact this is 432 homes on a brownfield site, a highly sustainable city centre location, little car provision, big potential for active transport, cycle storage, etc. as well. Build to rent might not meet, it might not take people off the housing list or meet the most pressing need as many of us would see it, but it does bring a different offering to the city, and there's kind of intrinsic benefits to it in terms of attracting and retaining young professionals and people who will benefit from communal facilities, working space, etc., that they may not be able to access otherwise, and the potential for a sense of community here. I also think the landscape elements of this are to be really welcomed. I think the papers say that about the park encompasses about 22% of the site area, over 100 new trees, and more green space ingrained within it throughout, which is, I think, something to be welcomed. So, yeah, as I say, on balance, I'll be supporting this today.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Potts.
Yeah, I feel really, really torn about this development because it does provide a lot of the things that, are high on my priority list, like the biodiversity net gain and the, the provision for sort of clean energy in the homes. But when we have a social housing list that's, we desperately need to provide for people affordable homes, I just can't justify a site of this size and scale. I can't justify voting for something like that when none of that provision is going to be there. So similarly, yeah, I feel that I too will abstain.
Well, I'm definitely going to vote in favour. I think the affordable housing bit is sad, and we should try and encourage it, but in today's economic troubles we're having all over the world, that's going to be a bit of a nightmare to bring that down. But I think the area needs regeneration. I think the shops, the restaurants, St Stephen's Street, even the places around that way will benefit from this. When Mars shut down, the footfall around that area now have disappeared, and a lot of places, shops were shutting down all over the place because Mars used to use it. So I think you get another 1,000 people, plus you've got your shops in there and people going in and out, places to walk, kids will come and play on the play park. I mean, other places will benefit from this, especially St Stephen's Street and the shops and the area around there. And I think that will make a good entrance with the old hospital site as well, which were big old buildings on there as well. So I'm definitely going to vote in favour. I just hope that you've got to post them so we don't have to go all the way up and down posting letters through letterboxes. We can just put them in one place and the residents can pick them up. So I'm getting a bit old going up and downstairs nowadays, so nice posting them down the bottom would be very handy. Okay, if no one else wishes to say anything, we'll move to the vote. All those in favour of the application, which is to approve, thank you. All those in favour? And there will be a count.
Yeah, so it's a recorded vote, so voting in favour is Councillor Driver, Councillor Laws, Councillor Lubbock, Councillor Giles, Councillor Hampton and Councillor Haynes.
All those against, please show. There's no one. People who abstained. Thank you.
So that's Councillor Oliver, Councillor Fox, and Councillor Stutley, and Councillor Knight.
Thank you, and that has been approved. That's the end of the committee. I've just got two things to say before people run away. This is my last one as chair of planning. Something happened last week, I don't know what it was, but I won't be chair next month, after next Tuesday, but I hope to be back in somewhere else. I will stay on, I am staying on the committee anyway, so you'll still see me, but I'll be down there now up here. And one other thing as well, I understand that we're losing one of our top planners, and I asked Sarah if she'd like to say anything about our planner, which we're going to lose today.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to acknowledge Tracy Armitage, who's been presenting to you today and has presented over the years a number of significant schemes for the city, including Anglia Square, is retiring at the end of next month after a very dedicated career to the City Council. So I just wanted the committee to note their thanks to Tracy for all her hard work over the years for the city.
Yeah, definitely. Councillor Sutley, I think you want to say something.
Thank you. On behalf of the committee, I'd like to thank you for your service over the years, and I look forward to working with you on planning again next year.
Thank you.
And also thank you to Tracy for your service.
Thank you, that's the end of the meeting, and we'll see you at the AGM, I think.